Quartet will be selling CDs outside in our lobby, right outside this room. At this time, please, first of all, I'm sorry, I'm from New Orleans. Welcome. Did I say welcome? Welcome. Please turn off your cell phones and, beepers. I don't know if people, we have beepers, and I'll add myself to that, or at least put them on silent. Yeah. We good? All righty then. I'm Don Lewis, and welcome to the 19th Annual Satchmo SummerFest, presented by Chevron and the Hilton Satchmo Legacy Stage. This event is produced by the French Quarter Festivals, Inc. Please make some noise with them, because they do this, because they do this and many other charitable festivals and organization functions throughout the year. It's really a lovely group. This event is made possible through the sponsorship of community-minded organizations and the sale of Abita beer, Jack Daniels, Sonoma-Cutrer, Corbel, Tequila Herradura, Finlandia, Pepsi, Aquafina, Bubbly, Bayou Rum, French Market Cold Brew, Louisiana Iced Tea, and festival merchandise, which helps pay for great entertainment, security, sanitation, recycling, EMS, and production costs. And a sidebar, there's some festival-specific goods outside that you can only get at a festival. So, be hearty in your spending. Please support your festival by purchasing from our beverage and merchandise booths. Do your part to keep the festival clean by using recycling and trash containers on site, and support our recycling effort by purchasing a reusable souvenir cup at our beer and cocktail booths. And please enjoy responsibly. Special thanks to the Satchmo Legacy Stage contributors like the Hilton, Harrah's, New Orleans, Joseph K. and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation, Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation, the Barbershop Harmony Society, the Fertel Foundation, Ricky and Vicky Nurigan, and Andrea Duplessis. And thank you to all our sponsors, including Chevron, Brown Forman, Abita Brewing Company, GE, Fidelity Bank, WWL-TV, Offbeat Magazine, and so many, many, many more. And pick up a schedule so you can know where you're going throughout the festival for the performances, events, and the culinary lineup. Go grab a bite before the next act begins, and stop by the merchandise tent to purchase the official Satchmo SummerFest poster, shirts, and souvenirs. Enjoy the 19th Annual Satchmo SummerFest, presented by Chevron. And happy birthday, Louis Armstrong. In the meantime, yes, please, a hand to our noble mentor. And without further ado, make some noise for him, y'all. Yes.
Here. I had a great day yesterday, heard some great stuff and some great lectures in this hall, and it just fascinates me, all the great stuff that's going on here. My name is David Wright. I am a barbershop musician, arranger, and historian. This is my good friend Vic Hobson, who is a jazz musician and historian. We both have other lives. He is an engineer, and I'm a mathematician, but never mind about that because this is about music. But it's just great to be here. I'm very honored that we could come here and have this discussion today, because I think it has something in it that you may find interesting. So as you see on the screen there, it talks about Louis Armstrong, New Orleans Jazz, and Barbershop Harmony, the untold story of how barbershop harmony impacted American music through jazz. Let me tell you that if you're skeptical about that, I was just like you 6 months ago, but I had an epiphany, and now I know some things that I didn't used to know, and maybe some of this will be of interest to you. We also have on stage Crossroads Quartet. They're an international champion quartet. And in this hour, they're going to be demonstrating a few licks that Barbershop sings, and we'll discuss the similarity of that with some jazz, and we'll have some jazz sound bites too. In the next hour, and I hope all of you stay around for that, they're going to present a concert right here in this auditorium, and you don't want to miss that. They are really good, and it's just something fantastic for you to hear. A little different from the other music you hear at this festival, but it has everything to do, I believe, with jazz and with Louis Armstrong, as you will see as this story unfolds today. First of all, a little background. In recent years, we have become fully aware of the prominent role African Americans played in the beginnings of barbershop harmony. This was something we didn't know much about for many years. Those of us who sing barbershop are not historians, so we didn't care. We figured, probably back there somewhere, some black people sang this thing, but we mostly associated old barbershop with white guys with armbands and a straw hat. But as a matter of fact, there was an article, and I realized I didn't make my fonts big enough for these screens, so never mind that you can't read it. We'll make it clear what we're talking about. A gentleman who's in the audience, Lynne Abbott, wrote a groundbreaking article where he demonstrated absolutely inarguably that the African American had huge impact on the origins of barbershop harmony and in fact were probably primarily responsible for it. He is a curator at Tulane University Jazz Archive, and he published this eye-opening article in the early 90s. I believe it was something like 1993 or 94. Lynn is in the audience. Please raise your hand, Lynn. And there he sits. And without that, we wouldn't know near as much as we do. In fact, it was Lynn's article that caught Vic's eye as well and got him started on this theme, I believe. Now, just a little bit about barbershop and its history with black Americans. James Weldon Johnson was a prominent author, educator, lawyer, diplomat, songwriter, civil rights advocate. He was an early leader in NAACP. In fact, I think he was a co-founder. He wrote the song Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is sometimes viewed as the black national anthem. And in 1929, he was beginning to worry that African-American influence of barbershop was being forgotten, that it was now just white people singing it. And he wrote this article that you see in front of you, and he recalls hearing quartets of singing waiters in his hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, when he was a small boy. That would have been the mid to late 1870s. So if there were professional quartets singing at that time, how many years before that must have there been barbershop quartets? Many years before. So you see that barbershop harmony predates jazz by at least 50 years. And he also talked about at age 15, he was in a quartet with his brother that competed against other quartets. We don't even know what he meant by the word competing. They just probably had a sing-off. But all this activity was going on in the 1870s. He said, pick up 4 colored boys or young men anywhere, and chances are 90 out of 100 that you have a quartet. Let one of them sing the melody, and the others will naturally find the parts. Indeed, it may be said that all male Negro youth of the United States is divided into quartets. On the right in that picture of the quartet is James Weldon Johnson. Now, along comes the gentleman sitting to my right, Vic Hobson. He wrote a book. Well, first he wrote a book 2 or 3 years ago that talked about the relationship between barbershop blues and jazz. Very interesting. I read it. My eyes clung to every page. Then he came out with this book, Creating Jazz Solo, Louis Armstrong and Barbershop Harmony, in which he went a step further. And he claimed that barbershop harmony clearly impacted the beginning of jazz. In particular, it influenced Louis Armstrong and many others. When I'm a person who I love New Orleans jazz and I love barbershop. I had sat and listened to jazz many, many times, and I listened to the instruments. I listened to the parts. I'm that kind of a guy. And I don't know how many times I thought, well, that baritone lick is just like a barbershop baritone. It's doing the same thing. The embellishments are just the things that barbershoppers do. The harmonization are the things that barbershop harmony does. So when I read this book, it was like an epiphany. I thought, my goodness, of course. It's the only thing that makes sense. So I'm going to turn over the mic to Vic now, and he's going to talk a little bit. Take it away.
Well, thank you, David. Well, it's good to be back again. I was here last year doing a talk, and it's even better to be back with not only David, but the Crossroads Quartet, who are going to be demonstrating some of this. So I think as David's set out, certainly African Americans were heavily involved in singing barbershop, but it's the relationship to jazz that I'm particularly interested in. And another piece from James Weldon Johnson appears in his book Black Manhattan, where he talks about a band, the Memphis Students, who were not students and weren't from Memphis either. What they were actually professional musicians. And But he talks about them as the first professional jazz band on any stage, certainly on the New York stage. And the reason that he does this is not, well, it's essentially because of the way that when they played, they also sang. And if I can read the quote here, because you may not be able to see it on the... it said, while playing the lead, someone might sing bass, and while someone was playing the alto part, they'd sing tenor, and so on, in accordance to the different voices and the instruments they were playing. So what they were doing was directly transferring these sort of sung lines onto stringed instruments. And of course, what this begins to demonstrate is the way that these sort of barbershop lines were getting transferred onto musical instruments. And it's fairly obvious when you've got a string band, as these were, mostly stringed instruments, they had one or two blown instruments. But of course, once you get to a period where everybody's got an instrument in their mouth, that relationship is no longer so obvious. It also begins to make sense of a lot of the things that early musicians say about how this sort of transition from ragtime into jazz, how they talk about sort of playing ragtime by ear. And I think it also points up the importance, I think at least, of the spasm bands in early jazz, because essentially these were string bands with people singing, playing instruments. And of course, Louis Armstrong was known to play the Swanee whistle with his street quartet and also imitate a clarinet. So I think James Weldon Johnson's quite right about this. This probably was the first jazz band, at least on a professional stage. So it puts the history of jazz back a decade or more.
So just a little more background. Scott Joplin sang in a quartet when he was a youth. And he was so fond of that harmony that, you know, we think of him as a ragtimer, but his lifetime work was an opera. It was called Treemonisha. It wasn't even performed in his lifetime, but it was intended to reproduce the musical customs of rural African Americans in the 1870s. And he wrote right into the opera a barbershop quartet, which was 4 singing field hands. And he wrote the song called We Will Rest a While, which was supposed to be like they sang back then. I'm going to invite Crossroads to come forward. There's a little bit of the music that's too small for you to see, but never mind, you're going to get to hear it.
We will rest a while, we will rest a while, 'cause it makes us feel very good, very good. We will rest a while, we will rest a while. Soon we'll be at home chopping wood, chopping wood. We will rest a while, we will rest a while, 'cause it's almost eaten time, We will rest a while, we will rest a while, 'cause resting is very fine.
All right, that's it. Thank you. Now, you may have noticed when they got to that rest a while, that big striking chord, the African American harmonizers spoke of cracking up a chord. When they would hit on a good lick, they would love to just hold that thing. In fact, they would back up and try to get there again because they were just woodshedding in a field or on a street corner. And that is the epitome of the cracked up chord. If you like musical analysis, it's a flat 6 chord. If you're in the key of B flat, it's a G flat chord. And what a great piece of harmony that is. Now, others who sang Barbershop, that maybe this will surprise you. W.C. Handy, 1888, was tenor in a quartet in Florence, Alabama. They had a quartet for trying out of new swipes. They often serenaded their sweethearts with love songs. White bloods, quote, white bloods overheard and took to hiring them to serenade the white girls. Jelly Roll Morton, recalling his Barbershop quartet. The boys had some beautiful harmony they sang. And of course, we got together and made all kinds of crazy ideas of the harmony, which made it beautiful and made it impossible for anybody to jump in and sing. Now, if you're a quartet harmonizer, you really identify that because we don't like people singing along. It messes up the harmony. So there was. Jelly Roll Morton was a true Barbershop harmonizer. Sidney Bechet.